I call the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta.
E tika ana me tāpiri atu taku mihi ki tērā rangatira rongonui, ki tērā tōtara a irima, no reira te rangatira moi mai rā. Mr Speaker, I would like to also support the Minister's acknowledgement and recognition of former board member, the late Irima Hinari, and his contribution not only to the National Trust Board, the Waitangi National Trust Board, but also in other fields as a contribution to New Zealand's history. Nō reire te rangatira tēnei e kore e mutu ngā mihi ki a koe. The Minister has covered much of the consideration of the Select Committee, but I thought it would be useful to share some of the considerations of the Select Committee when we made the changes that were referred to. Much of the history with regards to the gift of lands and the establishment of the Trust Board was leaned upon to consider the submission request, certainly of Arapeta Hamilton, and the recommendation that thought be given to equity of representation of family members. I wanted to draw the attention of the House to Vernon Reid's history and recollection of the Bledisloe gift, because that is the basis upon which we thought it would only be fair to consider the addition of Māori family members of those stated. And for those who are history buffs, I would call on your own thoughts surrounding the way in which members were added to this particular board. Indeed, in a brief way, Henry Williams and Tamati Wakanene were the first named representatives on this board, and then Edward Gibbon Wakefield was added, and then that fell to identified representatives of Honeheke, Maihekawati and Pomare to be included. What was not factored into the process was that for the 4 Māori whānau, 1 representative actually had to give voice to those interests, whereas with the other whānau, each family member were able to have a representative of their own. Now, I have heard the Minister say that a transparent process should occur for the selection of those members, and I'm sure that the current convention of those 4 Māori whānau to select their representation has some process to it. Far be it for me to try and articulate that, but the point should be made that there would be, certainly within those family members, an agreed way to be able to select their particular member. Of more note, interest and note, I think, in our deliberations was the submission from the board. And the board appeared keen in their submission to ensure that the future thinking about the way in which the Waitangi National Trust could conduct its business and affairs were within the frame of modernising the scope and powers. So we welcome, certainly as a Select Committee, the indication from the Minister that there will be a review. In fact, when the Minister appeared before the Select Committee to answer to some of the questions that we had in our own minds around clarity for the review, we were heartened to know that a wide scope, a broad review would take place, that there would be consultation with the board, that it would be in quite a defined time frame, although no reference was made to urgency on the legislative timetable. We know how these things work, Minister. And so that was a very comforting kind of response. However, that said, we did continue to believe that it was within the scope of the bill to include representation of the Māori members, and that's how we've reported back on this particular bill. We also believe that some of the powers that were identified by the board submission was useful to raise in this House as well. They wanted practical things, powers to manage and protect the trust's assets into the future. That would be a part of a modernisation process. They stated that it was important to consider the scope of the trust to be able to borrow, to remove some of the lease restrictions that were on them, and to include further provisions relating to the management and utilisation of the forestry block and the Waitangi endowment land. For my part, in reading the submission and trying to understand the current operating limitations perhaps of the board, I thought these were all very genuine, useful suggestions and can be picked up in the review that the Minister has committed to. One of the things that they raised in their submission was the ability to increase penalties for offences and breaches to bylaws. Now, I didn't kind of pursue a question line along this frame, but it seemed to me if they've asked for it, it might be something well to consider going forward. We did ask the question as we considered the two particular land blocks that are associated with this, the trust, firstly the forestry block and then the endowment block. Were any of these two pockets of land subject to treaty settlements? In relation to the forestry block, we were informed, and officials have that contained in the advice, that this is solely private land and would not be subject to settlement. However, the potential of the endowment block being subject to settlement, because it's actually owned by the Crown, is a potential. Can I say for my part, given that the gift, the original Bledisloe gift, was for the benefit of New Zealand, the Bledisloes have done our country a great service to ensure that the document that defines our country, the Treaty of Waitangi, and the place for where those celebrations can be occurred, should be something that we can continue to support in the spirit of what the treaty represents for this country. It would be a sad day if the transfer of the endowment was handled in a transactional manner that did not take account of the significance of Waitangi and the place where our founding document was signed. So I place it on the table. Maybe it's something that will be debated sometime later and in another type of debate. Mr. Speaker, can I say that we're really privileged at the Māori Affairs Select Committee to have the kind of conversations and debates that require us to pursue with some diligence the issues that would, in other select committees, divide a committee, divide their views on a number of things. But that didn't happen in this particular instance, where we felt that there was some tension around expanding the membership in front of a review. We took time to consider what we were trying to achieve here. And can I say, in the spirit of our committee, we basically landed on the fact that it was about equity of representation. That yes, perhaps the board is a large board. Yes, perhaps it could make decisions around the table somewhat lengthy. However, the spirit of the decision making at this particular board, I would hasten to say that it's probably a little bit different to some other boards. On that note, the decision around shortening the time of service of members on the board to a maximum of 3 terms. We had some further discussion on this. This may also come up in the review. Some of and certainly in relation to the membership of the Māori members, is where mana is recognised, where the contribution of service is recognised. Often that's a lifetime appointment, and nothing an individual can do can get away from that. So while in this particular change to the bill there is a stipulation of a 3-year maximum term, I much rather think that in the review this may be one of the issues that will be revisited based on how representation over time has conducted itself in the best interests of the people of Māori, but certainly in the spirit of the Waitangi National Trust Board, to ensure that our overall interests as a country can be represented on this particular board. I'm looking forward to the opening of the new centre. I'm looking forward to continuing to see young people go to Waitangi as a part of their national education program about the history of our country, just as I enjoy going to Anzac ceremonies and seeing that particular day celebrated in a way that can make us proud as New Zealanders. Kia ora koutou. We support the bill.